From that to the newspapers now. Going to have a look at what's grabbing headlines here in France. Solange is with us today. The French papers are talking a lot, aren't they, Solange, about the failure of what's become known as the Jamaica talks in Germany.
Indeed. Let's first start and talk about why they're actually called the Jamaica talks. Now, it's because the colors of the Jamaican flag are the same as the colors of the three parties that we're trying to reach an accord. Black for the CDU, yellow for the FDP, and of course green for the Greens. Now, turning to the collapse of the talks, papers are asking this morning, what does this mean for Angela Merkel? Now, L'Opinion says that the failure to strike a deal after the FDP party walked out has put Merkel in a very weak position, that the paper calls the idea of Germany without a government, quote, akin to a nightmare. And the paper says that it's not just Germany that's living the nightmare, but all of Europe as well, with Germany representing a fifth of the EU's economy. This is not good for the entire bloc. And the paper says that Europe generally looks to Germany for some sort of semblance of stability, and this isn't the case. Now, L'Opinion also goes into how this has happened before in other countries in Europe. It says that it hopes Germany will be able to find a way to govern faster than the Dutch did. Earlier this year, it took them 7 months to form a government, to create an accord. And L'Opinion also cites the example of Spain, which had to head to the polls twice 2 years ago to finally reach a coalition government.
Yeah, new elections in Germany, or the possibility of new elections in Germany, is subject of a piece you found in the French Huffington Post. Yeah,
Angela Merkel hasn't used up all of her cards yet. That's what Huffington Post says this morning. She can still try and form a minority government, and she's going to discuss her options later on today with the executive committee of her party, as well as the federal president of Germany. The Huffington Post says that everything, though, is pointing to new elections next year. And the website asks whether or not Merkel could realistically be the main candidate in the case of new elections, or whether these talks, this breakdown has weakened her position so much that someone else would have to replace her. Now, Huffington Post also wonders whether or not last night's breakdown is signaling the end of the Merkel era, where she's been in power for 12 years.
You found a piece, haven't you, in Les Echos. It's the French financial daily. Of course, it could have big financial ramifications, this, couldn't it?
Indeed. Already the markets and the euro have taken a dip this morning. And Les Echos says in their headline that all of Europe is going to feel this problem, and that the possibility that Germany has no majority government, at least for now, could have effects in a lot of other countries.
OK, well, let's move on to something a little bit different happening here in France this week. It is the annual Mayors' Conference in Paris.
Yeah, for the past 100 years, it is the 100th anniversary of the Mayors' Conference. Thousands of mayors come to Paris for a 4-day event, and they gather to discuss what's going on in their towns and cities, and also how they feel about the central government. And this year's conference is incredibly tense because mayors are rather angry with Emmanuel Macron and his proposal to cut their budgets by, get this, 13 billion euros. Now, Le Figaro explains that the mayors have been joining forces in the past few weeks to try and find a way to fight the government on the budget cuts. But Le Figaro explains that the Macron government is also pulling out the big guns this year at the conference to try and smooth things over. 14 of Macron's ministers are going to speak at the 4-day event, and 1,500 of the mayors will be invited to the Élysée Palace on Wednesday to meet with the president. The prime minister has also promised that his government is, quote, not at war with France's mayors. The Élysée has said that they will be unveiling some new measures to try and appease things. But according to Figaro, Macron's team remains adamant that they are not going to back down on the budget cuts, saying that Macron is not Santa Claus and that he doesn't have 13 billion euros in a bag on his back.
Ready to deliver on December the 24th. OK. Yeah. Well, finally, the French paper's going to have to be very careful about how I say this. They're talking about sex ed this morning, sex education.
Indeed. Sex ed, or sex education, is a requirement in French schools, and it has been since 2001. A law was passed then saying that teens and preteens need to have at least 3 sessions about sexual education. But an article in L'Humanité says that 25% of French schools don't actually teach it at all, or don't have a sort of course load set up. In the schools that do teach sex ed, L'Humanité has found that most classes just focus on the science of it, or on reproduction, and that little attention is given to the emotional, psychological elements that are involved. In light of the growing list of complaints about sexual harassment that sort of started from the Harvey Weinstein scandal, Emmanuel Macron's government has promised announced that they're going to introduce new reforms this spring. Now, La Croix takes on this subject as well, and they say that's great news, that Macron's plan is great news. The Christian paper has an op-ed this morning by the human rights advocate Jacques Toubon. He says that current sex ed laws are failing children, and that more useful information needs to be taught, and there needs to be more focus on respect and equality between boys and girls. And he invites Christian groups, La Croix again is a Christian paper, to sign on to his charter to promote better sexual education.
OK, that coming up as well in the next week or so. Thank you very much. Solange Mougin with the French paper. She'll be up with the international ones in a couple of hours' time. No doubt mentioning the death of Charles Manson, that which we've been bringing you for the first time in the last half hour. We'll have the latest on that after the break.